Welcome to Monster Transmissions. Today we're going to go over how to disassemble a 700 R4 transmission. Now we're going to be using our famous Monster in a Box kit, the heavy duty one. They'll give you all the parts you need to overhaul your transmission. So here's the core we're going to be working with. This happens to be a car case. There are different case variations on the 700 R4 and also different extension housings. And these are going to be the tools that you need in order to disassemble the transmission. There'll be additional tools needed for the reassembly, but these are the basic tools. You'll need a pick or a scribe. You need 4 different sockets, 15 millimeter, 13 millimeter, 10, and 8 millimeter. Also an impact gun. This one happens to be a 1/2 inch drive, but it's a 3/8 drive is fine. You need a ball peen hammer. You need a chisel, a long flat blade screwdriver, snap ring pliers, 15 millimeter wrench, crescent pliers, also known as channel locks, and we need air to blow out some of the pistons and parts. You also need a spring compression tool. First of all, what we want to do is remove the linkage arm off the transmission. This is the manual shift lever arm on the transmission itself. The head on that nut is 15 millimeters. All right, so we remove the linkage. Make sure you have a bucket or something or a pan to put all the parts in so you don't lose them. The next item we're going to remove is the governor cap. We need to use safety first. We'll put some safety glasses on. The governor cap removed. Factory ones usually have a rubber sealing ring here, like this one does. You can discard that. Then it exposes the governor assembly itself. That will simply slide right out of the case of the transmission. The next item we want to remove is the rear tail housing seal. It's easier to remove it now instead of trying to chase the tail across the bench as you hammer on it. It's a metal clad seal. You get a new one in the kit. Now the next item we want to remove is your actual speedometer system. This is your speedometer housing, and this is usually a 10 millimeter bolt. So you remove that bolt, and now we're going to remove the housing. Be careful not to grab the threads of where the speedometer cable screws on. You can just grab the housing itself, wiggle it left and right. This is the speedometer housing and the gear. Now we're going to remove the 4 extension housing bolts. They're 15 millimeter head. I suggest that you take a hammer and soften them up a little bit. And you remove the extension housing. There is a flat seal here. You can discard this seal. Now here's your mechanical speedo gears. We're going to remove this gear assembly. It has a little metal clip right here. You're going to depress these tabs down and slide this gear out down the output shaft. I'm going to rotate the transmission around, and we're going to remove the servo cap and the servo assembly. It's right here. Again, use a hammer that's been sealed for a long time. Just gently tap the cover. Use a screwdriver. You lift the snap ring up. Very easy to remove. This is a snap ring for the servo cap. Now you're going to use the crescent pliers. You're going to grab the servo cap and twist it left and right and walk it out of the case. It'll walk up to a certain point because it does have a rubber seal around the perimeter of it. Once you grab the rubber seal, you can stretch the rubber seal, or if it breaks, that's not a problem either. This is the 4th gear cover. This fits inside the servo cover itself, the tallest part facing the indentation of the cover. Remove that whole assembly out of the case. Line all these items up in order. And this is your complete servo assembly. We'll set this to the side. First item you're going to remove, there are 16 pan bolts. They have a 13 millimeter head. We're going to remove all 16 bolts. Again, be careful not to lose any of these bolts, because you will need all of these to reassemble the unit. Wrap the pan with, again with the hammer gently. And that will break the seal. And that way you're not driving a screwdriver between. Do not recommend that, because then you'll gouge the casting or you'll damage the pan. Simply remove the filter from a pump assembly. Remove the support bracket. Now all the valve body bolts on the 700 are the same length. And there's one unique one. We'll get into that in the auxiliary valve body. But all the main steel casting valve body bolts are the same thread, same length, and the same bolt head. You have a 10mm bolt head. Now this is a unique bolt. Either the head will be yellow, painted yellow, or the bolt will be gold. The reason is this is a unique length. Now we're simply going to lift the tube out of the auxiliary valve body. You can rotate it around, and then it'll simply slide out of the pump assembly. You have the harness here that goes to the case connector. It has a tab on it locking the harness down right here. You simply move that clip and it'll release the harness. You remove from the temperature switch and the oil pressure switch on the valve body. There are two bolts holding the lockup solenoid into the casting of the case, and that goes into the pump assembly. There are two short 10mm head bolts. Remove this, the brackets holding the harness down, and then the lockup harness is removed from the transmission. The parking tensioner rod that goes onto the linkage, that's a 13mm head. And now we're going to remove the rest of the valve body bolts. Okay, these two bolts here go to the TV system, the TV assembly on the transmission. There's two support bolts hold the bracket and the assembly together. TV linkage, connecting rod. Break it from the seal or the gasket that's on the valve body shift plate. There will be check balls that come out. Don't be concerned at this point where they go, because you get new ones in the kit, and I'll show you where they fit in the casting of the valve body. The manual shift lever rod connects to the linkage. Now we have two assemblies left. This is your 1-2 accumulator body. Has two different length bolts. They're unique. And it holds the assembly on. And then there's the 1-2 accumulator housing and a spring assembly. You can use air pressure right here. Ensure that you point this away from you because it's full of oil, and it will pop out pretty good. So it's 1-2 accumulator housing and spring. Fill the stuff together. Again, keep them in order so you know how to put them back later. So we're going to remove two of the bolts. 8mm head. So you need to be careful you don't lose this check ball. This one actually rolled into the case. And this has to go back there for the accumulator valve body to work. Remove the gaskets. They come off that good. That's great. You got the shift plate and another valve body gasket. Now to remove the shift plate and the gasket, there's check balls in the case. In the shift correction kit that comes in our Monster in a Box kit, will show you the location of these check balls. There's also two filters. There's one here for the governor and one for the lockup solenoid. You can remove those. Two filters, discard them. Those come in the kit. Now we're going to work on a 4th gear accumulator. You have a spring. The spring will come in the kit, but keep it together. It has a center dowel pin. That dowel pin you can pull up, and you can actually walk left and right the accumulator piston out of the casting. Okay, now we're going to remove the manual shift lever linkage. We're going to start with the parking pawl. It has two 13mm head bolts. One is easy to see. It's up here where the valve body was, and one's further recessed into the case. So you may have to rotate this shift lever rod back so you can access and get clearance for the socket to fit on that bolt. Both bolts are the same length. same thread. There's what's called a castle nut. It's a lock nut right here. It's 15 millimeters. And again, lefty-loosey or counterclockwise. Once you have that removed, you can pull the shift linkage itself off of the assembly, just like that. Your manual shift lever rod. And there's a spacer clip. We'll get instructions how to put these components back during reassembly. Remove the shift linkage seal. Remove the front seal. Now we're going to remove the 7 pump bolts. They have a 13 millimeter head and a unique bolts. I'll show you them once I get them off the pump. In that they have a seal designed inside the head itself. We're going to remove all those. Now we're going to remove the front pump. The best way to remove that, you can go pry between the casting and the case itself. So a little bit of pressure on it. And you tap the case. Okay, now you pry against the pump assembly, slide it forward. This is one of many sub-assemblies that we'll get into as far as disassembly. So pump washer, put it right back onto the pump. The drum assemblies. In order to remove those, we need to remove the band off of the stop, which releases the band. Now you can slide the drum assembly out. This is the band stop I was referring to. Just goes through the valve body section of the case. Now we have the forward sun gear. Now we're going to remove the snap ring with the snap ring pliers. Spread the snap ring open. Remove the output shaft. And the little snap ring is right here. Now we're going to remove the front planetary assembly. There we have the front planetary ring gear and hub. Next component is the sun shell. It's a washer that goes between the sun shell and the center support. Once the snap ring has been released in the case, you simply walk the snap ring out. It's easier to use the output shaft as a tool and simply hit the center support forward. It'll knock the whole assembly forward. This is the sun shell, the rear sun gear. This is the center support. And now we have the rear planetary assembly. This is all your reverse clutches and steels. And then you got the rear ring gear and hub. This support clip which holds the center support in place. I'll show you how to place that in the case for reassembly. This is a reverse compression tool. This fits into the case. These tabs lock into the casting. Now that we have the tool compressing the spring down, we use the snap ring pliers. We're going to open that snap ring in the center part of the case and to release the spring assembly. Once that's open and it comes out, here's your snap ring. Now we're going to remove the compression tool. This is your reverse spring assembly. And the snap ring actually was riding on the inside of this assembly. Slide the snap ring through the coils of the spring so you do not lose it and it belongs to that assembly. Now we're going to remove the reverse piston. Best way to do that is apply some air pressure. And you're going to apply air pressure right through this port. Now we're going to set the case off to the side and we're going to go into the disassembly of the smaller sub-assemblies. The first one to start with is the pump. First off, this is an auxiliary pump for the 700R4. We're going to remove the pump washer. It has 2 tabs. We'll go over that during the reinstallation. There are 5 13 millimeter head bolts. You're going to remove all 5 bolts and you're going to separate the pump assembly. Now this is the pump body and this is the pump stator. And inside this is a 10 vane, which is the most common for a 700. It's a 10 vane pump rotor gear assembly. We're going to disassemble this component now. We're going to disassemble the pump assembly now and pull the rotor out. Simply lift up on the spring assembly. There's 2 springs in most applications. And the pump slide will now just simply slide out of the casting. It has a guide ring on the bottom, a sealing ring, and inside there's also another rubber seal. There is the slide stop and the spring for the slide stop. Be careful not to lose those components because you will need those for reassembling. Do not come in the kit. It has a rubber seal. Remove that and discard. This will come in the new kit. Now we're going to inspect the surface here because this is where the rotor rides. And if it gets some debris in there, even in the vanes, it'll cut grooves into the casting of the pump assembly. This is where the front seal was riding, and this is your pump bushing. Now we're going to remove this pump bushing from the face down inside to the pump. Your pump bushing. There's several areas I want to show you on this pump that you need to be concerned with for wear. Again, this surface where the pump rotor rides, you need to be concerned with the stator itself. This is the portion that fits into the torque converter. To make sure these teeth are not all worn away or chewed away completely. There is a front stator bushing and there's a rear stator bushing. Ensure that those aren't damaged. And just past this bushing inside is the stator shaft itself. That's where the input shaft will ride, will slide in here. It can cut grooves into the stator and therefore will not seal and the clutches will burn up immediately. So this is the first sub-assembly. The next sub-assembly we're going to work on is the lower reverse drum. First couple of areas you want to look at immediately for damage is this area. This is where the band clamps and rides. So this area must be smooth and good. Inside here, make sure there's no ring grooves from the pump stator rings. When I'll disassemble the lower reverse drum, direct drum, simply remove the snap ring, compress that, take the snap ring off, and now we're going to take the clutches out. Your top backing plate, then it's clutch steel, clutch steel, clutch steel to a wave. Now we're going to need to use a foot press or a press. We're going to compress this spring assembly down. So we're going to remove the piston. We're going to compress the spring down. Use snap ring pliers. And there's exposed to the opening of the snap ring. Simply spread the snap ring open and slide it out of the drum. This is a snap ring. Release the tension on the spring assembly itself. Now remove the snap ring, remove the spring assembly, and again, place the snap ring through the coil spring. That way you know this snap ring belongs to this assembly. Now we're going to remove the piston. And it has 2 lip seals, an inner and an outer. We are not going to remove them now. We're going to wash the piston and inspect it for any kind of cracks or damage. Now you want to inspect several areas on this drum. Again, the ring grooves, the bushing. There's 2 bushings, one here and one here at the top of the drum. Make sure there's no ring grooves. Ensure the surface is clean and smooth. And also compare it to, let's say, a damaged one. This one's burnt and it's also got grooves in there, and that's where the band clamps. So if this surface is not level and is not smooth, it'll chew up the band and you'll lose 2nd and 4th gear. The other area to be concerned with is this area here. This rides in the sun shell. And they can become mushroomed out, which will cause failure as well. The sun shell rides into this drum in this fashion. You also want to inspect the very bottom where the wave plate rides. It can chew out the bottom of the drum, spin and lock, and when you go to reverse or first gear, it will not apply because that cushion is stuck below the lip of the drum. We're now going to work on the forward drum. Forward drum has a lot of clutch components inside. There's a lot of components. This is the main component of the transmission. It has the most components inside. First few areas you want to look at. This is the input shaft. This is the 30 spline that goes into the torque converter. This is the lock-up sealing ring. We're going to remove that component. This will come in a kit. Discard that. Next, there is a Torrington bearing and a spacer washer. You remove both of those components. It's a Torrington bearing. Components there. Now, we're going to remove the clutches. There's a snap ring. There's several snap rings in this drum. Simply pry against the casting and lift the snap ring above the tab. This is your 3/4 clutch pack. You remove that clutch pack. We have another snap ring. It's removed the same way, same fashion. And now this will be your forward sprag assembly and your forward clutch pack. So that's all the clutches and steels removed from the forward drum. There is a Torrington bearing that goes into the center. This rides inside your forward sprag assembly. So I lay it in there so you know exactly where it belongs. There's also a center seal. This is your output shaft seal. Even though it's in your forward drum, the output shaft actually rides and goes into the seal and rides clear inside here. So this is your complete drivetrain. Now we're going to use the foot press and we're going to compress this spring assembly in the forward drum. And again, I remove the snap ring to take the pistons out. There are 3 pistons and some other assemblies here. We'll go over that as we disassemble it. You're going to press the spring down. Okay, remove the snap ring. Release the tension on the spring assembly. Now remove the drum. This is the spring assembly. This is the whole piston assembly from the forward drum. We're going to leave the piston assemblies together so we can wash them and stack them back in order before reassembly. Now that we have the transmission completely disassembled, the next most important part to do is to clean all these components. You can use solvent like mineral spirits, carb cleaner. You want to clean all these components and inspect them while you're cleaning them. If there's a bad part, you need to order that part. We offer every part for this transmission on our website. So now we're going to go clean this transmission up.